It's time for another episode of Upgrading Eleanor, and this is part 3 of the battery and solar installation series. In today's video, I'm going to go over the battery aspect as well as the installation of all three 48-volt batteries. Hey everyone, I'm Joe and I'm one half of two Krazy campers, and after losing a combined weight of more than 200 pounds, we discovered we had so much more energy for activity. So come along with us as we explore the great outdoors and join us on a brand new adventure. And if you've been following along with us, we are actually in the middle of a series called Upgrading Eleanor for battery and solar installation. So recently we were contestants on RV Unplugged Season 2, and when we found out that we were going to be contestants, we decided in order to go off-grid, we need to upgrade our battery system. So this video, I'm actually filming the beginning and the end after the installation, and honestly after we finished competing in RV Unplugged, but somehow I lost the original intro and video, so I apologize for that. But basically what we're going to do is go through the complete installation of the battery aspect. So this series actually has a few different videos, and like I said, this is part 3. The first video was just a complete overview of the system. Part 2 was the actual inverter itself. And now part 3 is the batteries. We do have a couple more videos planned for this series, a brief one going over the solar, and then a final one kind of discussing everything about the system, what we've liked about it, what we don't like about it, as well as what can we actually run. Some of those things we're going to get into in this video, but just so you know, that one is coming. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on this video as well as the like button, because that really does help build the channel, but it lets us know what videos you guys are looking to see. So I do want to say this video is partially sponsored by Signature Solar. Signature Solar has all different types of products for your solar and battery needs, and it's actually where we got all the components for our system. So I'll leave a link for them down below. Signature Solar is partially sponsoring this video by giving us a discount on the batteries when we decided to put them in. We did a lot of research on what system we wanted to put in, and after I had already decided I wanted to use the EG4 system that I used, I contacted Signature Solar and asked them if they would be willing to work with us, and they gave us a small discount on all of the components in exchange for producing these videos. Now, just in case you didn't see the other 2 videos in this series, let's quickly recap the system that we've installed here in Eleanor. Rather than going with the typical 12-volt system that a lot of RVers are using, we opted to go with a 48-volt all-in-one system. This system is similar to what a lot of homesteaders put in their off-grid cabins. And we opted to go with this system for a few different reasons. Number one is cost. The price on these 48-volt server rack batteries is much less than what a lot of people are spending on the 12-volt batteries. And also, one of these batteries is equivalent to 4 of the 12-volt 100-amp-hour batteries that a lot of people are using. Along with that, the inverter is also cheaper. The inverter that we installed here retails for about $675, and the inverter that a lot of people are putting in their RVs runs somewhere around $1,300, and then you still have to get some solar charge controllers. This system has everything built in. But just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's less quality. This is a very high quality system, and the batteries come with a 5 or 10-year warranty depending on which battery you choose, and they're all using A+ cells. Number 2 is size. We are in a relatively small RV. We're not in a giant fifth wheel that has a large cargo capacity and a huge basement that you can put all of your components in. We only have a small amount of pass-through storage, and then we have our underbed. So we needed to use a system that wasn't going to take up all of our storage space. If we were to go with the same exact setup that we have, but using 12-volt 100-amp-hour batteries, we would need 15 of those batteries. That would pretty much take up our entire pass-through. Going with these 48-volt server rack batteries allowed me to put the batteries into my underbed storage and then have the inverter hanging in the pass-through, which is just on the other side of the wall. Now, the inverter also takes up a lot less room and weighs a lot less. It weighs somewhere around 25 pounds, and it simply hangs on the wall, and it does everything. You don't have to have an external solar charge controller, and you don't have to have an external battery charger. It's an all-in-one system. So it just makes it much easier. And number 3, and most importantly, is the ease of installation. If you've watched any videos from other RV YouTubers on their solar and battery installation, you'll see it can be kind of daunting. I mean, there are a lot of wires to run. You have to hook up solar charge controllers. You have to go from battery to battery. You have to make sure all of the wires are the right gauge. You have to make sure they're the exact same length. You have a lot of work to do. And like I said, it does take up a lot of room. This installation is very, very easy. Because it's an all-in-one system, you literally just have to hang an inverter somewhere in your RV, like for us, the pass-through, run a wire from your shore power to the inverter to give it shore power, run another wire back to your breaker panel, and then hook up your batteries. It is that simple. Now, if you want to add solar, that's just mounting the solar on your roof and running 2 wires down if your RV isn't already pre-wired. But this system can be installed in just a couple of hours, depending on how much wire you have to run from where your inverter is to where your breaker panel is. And for me, that made it a much more appealing system. I didn't have to worry about hooking up all these different things and going through everything. The all-in-one inverter does everything. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the batteries and then get into the battery installation, which is honestly very, very easy. So like I said, we're using 48-volt server rack batteries. And we opted for these server rack batteries for a few reasons. Number one, the ones from Signature Solar are very well made. Even though they're not nearly the cost of what a lot of people are spending on 12-volt batteries, they are using grade A plus cells, and depending on which version you get, you're getting either a 5 or 10-year warranty. I also like the fact that we're dealing with a company that is here in the United States. Yes, you can get cheaper batteries buying directly from China, but if you have a problem, you're going to have to try to deal with China itself, whereas these batteries, you're able to get them from a company right here in the United States, and if you have a problem, you can contact Signature Solar directly here in Texas. You don't have to wait till like 3 in the morning when the techs are awake over in China. The other thing that I really liked about them is the enclosures are all metal. A lot of the batteries that people are buying on Amazon are coming in like plastic containers, and then they're sealed shut, and you can't service them if there's a problem. With these batteries, you can actually have them serviced if one of the cells goes bad or something like that. It can be changed out. I also like that these batteries all have their own BMS system with an on-off switch, as well as its own built-in circuit breaker. Now, Signature Solar has 2 different forms of the EG4 battery. They have the EG4 Life Power and then the EG4 LL. We opted to go with the LL. For the most part, they are the same battery. They have the same amount of wattage, the same amount of amps. They function the same. They're the same size, the same weight, all of that. The difference comes down to a couple of things. The EG4 LL, which costs about $200 more, comes with a screen on the front so that you can see what's going on with the cells. You can actually see everything that's happening with the battery, make sure it's charging appropriately, make sure that there's not a bad cell. The other thing that I really like about it is that the EG4 LLs come with a built-in fire arrestor. So if for some reason, God forbid, you had a battery fire, it's got built-in fire arresters that would immediately put out that fire. The Life Power ones don't have that. Also, the EG4 LLs come with a 10-year warranty as opposed to a 5-year warranty on the EG4 Life Power. I wasn't super concerned about the screen because you can actually hook up to a computer and see what's going on with the cells. So it's not something I was really concerned about, but it is nice to have it in there. For me, the most important thing was the fire arresters as well as the warranty. The other reason that we have to use 48-volt batteries is because these all-in-one systems require 48 volts. Now, at the time of this recording, I believe the EG4 LL batteries retail for $1,500, right around that number, and then the EG4 Life Powers retail for right around $1,300. So, like I said, it's a $200 difference, and in my opinion, definitely worth the extra money, especially when you compare it to what people pay for the 12-volt systems. I think at the time that I'm recording this, something like a 12-volt 100 amp hour Battleborn battery is right around $800 or $900, and one of these batteries is equivalent to 4 of those batteries. So you're getting a lot more battery power for less money, and again, like I said, it takes up less footprint. So let's now get into the actual install of the system. Before we get into the battery installation, one small disclaimer. Please remember, I am not a licensed electrician. The purpose of this video is to show you what I did in my own personal RV after doing a lot of research and consulting with my son, who is a licensed electrician, and then also to show you exactly how I did it. It is not meant to be a tutorial guide for you to follow along. If you have any fear of electricity, if you don't know what you're doing, please contact a licensed professional. Your safety is the most important thing. Before we start the battery installation, I wanted to show you what I am currently working with. So I already had started disconnecting the solar panels when I thought about the fact that we should be showing you this. So this is our solar charge controller. This is going to come out. All of these wires are getting pulled. And then out here in the front, we have a single 12-volt 100 amp hour Battleborn battery. And it's wired very simply. We have our wire from our solar charge controller. This is going to the coach. We're going to take this out. We're going to probably be putting this under the back seat of my car, wired to an inverter and to a DC to DC charger. And then there's not going to be any batteries out here. So let's go ahead and unbox this battery. Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up. And again, we do have 3 of these in total. So this is just one. So we have our instruction manual. It does have some foam here covering the battery. And it looks like it is wrapped in plastic. And this is a very large battery. It also weighs almost 100 pounds. I believe it weighs like 90 something pounds. So we're going to get this out of the box and see how everything comes. See, here's what comes with the battery. We have our user manual, which is the EG4 LL rack mounted 48 volt 100 amp hour battery. And it's got all the instructions on here, charging, installation, everything else. We have our data cable for connecting the batteries together. And then we have our battery cables. So taking a look at the battery itself, we have our positive on this side. We have our negative on this side. We have an on-off button right here, as well as some lights to let us know the status. There's some dip switches for changing things. And then we have our on-off switch circuit breaker over here. So we can go ahead and turn that on. And you can see there, we've got our screen telling us everything that's going on. So when it comes to installing these batteries and mounting them, they're actually designed for a server rack. So you would get like this big rack thing and install all of them in there, and it usually has a set of bus bars. And if you have room in your RV, I would definitely recommend putting them into a server rack enclosure. But for us, we're going to be putting them under our bed, so we've got to figure out the best configuration. So these batteries can be mounted flat as designed, or you can lay them on their side. So like this side here, just take off this handle piece, or you can put it just like this, standing on its back. You just can't lay it on this side down. Obviously, it wouldn't work anyway because you're a circuit breaker, and you can't lay it upside down. Now for us, I'm not quite sure which way we're going to install them. What we're going to have to do is get them into the RV and put them underneath the bed and see what the best configuration is going to be, because the one thing I do want to do is keep all of the cables the same length. We're going to be taking these batteries and putting them into a bus bar, and then the bus bar to distributing everywhere else. So I want to make sure that I have a configuration that allows me to have the same exact size cable and length cable from the battery to the bus bar. So this is how we're going to mount our batteries under the bed. We have our 3 batteries. These are server rack batteries, 48 volt, 100 amp hour batteries. If you were going to compare this to just the 12 volt batteries, like the Battleborns or something like that, this would be the equivalent of 12 of those batteries. So we're going to put one here on the bottom, one over here on the bottom, and then this one directly in the center. We're going to put some aluminum rails down the side and use ratchet straps to hold everything into place so it doesn't shift around. Even though each battery does weigh 98 pounds, it's not going to move around too much. I just want to make sure this top one doesn't slide. Now, rather than daisy chaining and go positive to positive to positive, what we're going to do is everything is going to go into these 2 bus bars. So we have our positive bus bar here, our negative bus bar here. We're going to screw those into the floor, and then we're going to go positive into the bus bar, positive into the bus bar, positive into the bus bar, negative into the bus bar, negative into the bus bar, negative into the bus bar, and then there'll be a positive wire going from here into the inverter on the other side. We're also going to put a fuse and a breaker, and then the same thing with the negative. So we're going to go ahead and start screwing all this down and getting our cables connected. So we have all of our batteries hooked up to our bus bars. All of the cables are of equal length. And also, by the way, all of these batteries are in the off position. Make sure you have them all in the off position. So you have your breakers right here. See, off, 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 and also the BMSs are all off. So there is no power at all to these bus bars. Now, I forgot to turn on the camera, but I did screw a board into the side over here. And on here, we're going to mount our 48 to 12 volt converter. We're going to put our smart shunt, and we're also going to put our circuit breaker. Okay, so we have this cable here. This is coming off of our negative bus bar. Here's our smart shunt. We're going to mount it right about here. We're going to put this one here. So to the other side of the smart shunt, we're going to connect the cable that goes to our inverter, and we're going to connect a cable that goes to our 48 to 12 volt DC to DC converter. So if you are curious, cable sizes, the cable that we're using to go from the bus bar to the smart shunt and from the smart shunt to the inverter is a 1 gauge cable. And then the cable that we're using to go from the smart shunt to the DC to DC converter is 8 gauge. And it's going to be the same thing coming off of the positive bus bar. So as I was working on the batteries, the battery on my phone went dead. So I didn't really want to stop. I wanted to just keep going because we are doing a camping trip in a couple days, and I need to get this done. So I just kept going with wiring up everything with the batteries, and now that I've got my camera back and it's the next day, let me show you everything that I've got in here. So we have our batteries installed. I already showed you that. What I didn't show you is how I was going to secure them. So let me show you that now. Down here on the side, I put an aluminum bracket on each side, and then I ran these straps under the batteries and then under the aluminum bracket. I use these straps because it's what I had. I can always change it out later, but right now these are really good because they're able to cinch them down without hurting the battery, and they're not going to go anywhere. So we have our batteries. I already showed you. I have all of my positives going into the bus bar, all of my negatives going into the bus bar. By the way, if you're curious, these cables are 4 gauge wire. It came with 5. I ended up putting in 4 because I wanted it a little bit longer. We already showed you that. Then I have over here a 1 gauge wire, and that is going to go from the positive bus bar, and then they don't tell you you need it, but I decided I wanted to have some extra protection anyway. I'm waiting on a 300 amp T-fuse, which is going to mount right here. This is going to go into the T-fuse, and then this is the other side from the T-fuse, and this goes out to the circuit breaker, which then feeds into the inverter. Then we have our negative coming off of the bus bar, again, 1 gauge wire. It is feeding into our smart shunt. So the smart shunt is going to allow us to monitor the batteries and see how much battery we have left with our app. I believe I can also hook it into my unit up in the front. I have to double check that. The other side of this is feeding into everything else. So we have nothing between the smart shunt and the batteries. That's so that we know everything that's being used. Now, over here, this is a 48 to 12 volt converter. Since we're running a 48 volt system and the RV runs on 12 volt, we need to convert that down to 12 volts. So that's what this one here is. It's a Victron Orion TR48 12-30 amp. And the way you wire this up is, again, we have an input wire. The input wire is coming all the way down and to the positive bus bar over here. The negative input wire is coming over here to the system side of the smart shunt. So everything that we're using 12 volt will also get monitored by the smart shunt. Then we have our output. This is going to feed out to the 12 volt in the RV. And then I also have a couple of wires feeding over into this fuse block. And that's just for a couple little extra things, like we need to have power for the smart shunt. And also I wanted to add a USB hub over here. So it's just like another place to tie in some 12 volt. And then everything is feeding right down there in the corner into the pass-through storage. So something I wanted to show you is on the 48 to 12 volt converter, if you're using the one from Victron, there is this little adjustment screw right here, the potentiometer. That allows you to fine-tune the output voltage. So if I take my probes and my multimeter, I already have it adjusted, but I just want to show you where you're going to test. You're going to put your common in here and your positive in there and check it all the way down inside. So just push it all the way down and it should show you your voltage. So I've got it at 14.10. Could actually adjust it a little bit more if I wanted to, but I'm good with that. Now, just to give you an idea, if we go ahead and check the other side, we are still on DC, so we should get right around 52 volts. There we go, 52.4 volts. So that's the entire battery setup, and as soon as I get the T-fuse, we can connect that, and then we're going to hook everything up to the inverter, and we're going to give this a test run. So while we're waiting for our T-fuse, there's a couple more things that we can do, and that is connect our Ethernet cables as well as set our dip switches. Now, if you are only running one battery, you don't need to do this part with the Ethernet cables. And honestly, one battery is probably more than enough for most people, because one battery would be the equivalent of four 12 volt 100 amp hour batteries. So we're running like overkill here with 3 of them. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to take an Ethernet cable and we are going to plug it down here on the side into the battery communication. And then we're going to take the other end and plug it into this battery here. And this one's going to go onto the bottom. And this is a little bit more difficult trying to do this with one hand. So I'm going to go ahead and put the phone down and then connect it and show you what I did. Then we're going to take another cable and plug it into the top and run that to the bottom of the third battery. Now after we do that, we're going to set our dip switches. So we're setting this as number 1, and there's instructions in the manual on how to do it. This battery is going to be number 2, and then this battery is going to be number 3. Next, we're going to get our cable, and it's going to run from here out to the inverter. So we did get our T-fuse, so we have it installed. So we can show you one more time. We have all of the covers on our bus bars now. This battery currently is on. So we've got our positive running into that T-fuse. That T-fuse line then goes through into the pass-through, and then that's going to go into the circuit breaker, which then feeds into the inverter. Sorry for my glow, I guess you can call it, from all of the sweat on my head, but it is hot in here. I have the air conditioner off right now, and it's going to have to stay off because soon I'm going to go back over to the inverter to finish up that installation, which you see in the other video. And all I have left is to hook up the AC wires, but I didn't want to do that until we had the batteries installed and we ran a test and knew that everything was good. So now that we have the batteries installed, we have one more thing we need to do, and then we can hook the inverter into the AC and basically disconnect the other battery that I have out in the front, the Battleborn battery. But the last thing that we need to do in order to be able to do all of that is to hook up the 12 volt. So we have that 8-gauge wire that's coming off of the 48 to 12 volt converter. We ran that through the pass-through and then back down underneath the RV with all of the other wires, because we're going to need to connect that into the 12 volt system on the RV. And your RV may be different, but on this one here, up underneath the RV towards the front, a little bit behind the jack, like right below the pass-through, there is a fuse. And on that fuse, we currently have the battery in the front. The Battleborn battery feeds a cable to that fuse, and then on the other side of the fuse is the trailer jack, as well as things going down into the main cabin. So there's like 3 or 4 things that are feeding off of that, but that basically feeds the entire RV. So rather than like rewiring everything, what I'm basically going to do is run that 8-gauge wire back up to where the Battleborn battery is connecting into that fuse and call it a day. And basically just make it think that the Battleborn battery is still there, or the battery is still up in the front, only it's in the pass-through coming off of the 48 to 12 volt converter. Let me go show you what I'm talking about. Okay, it's a little noisy with our house air conditioner going, but I really wanted to show you this setup because it's amazing what I have found as we've been working on the RV. So this is the fuse I'm talking about, and it's actually wired up wrong. So this wire right here is actually the wire that's coming from the battery up here, the battle-born battery. This wire here is going to the trailer jack. It's not fuse protected, and there's no inline fuse. This should be on this side. It serves no purpose. You can also see up here, look at how that wire is just kind of in there. It's kind of eating away. I may have to look and see if I have a new fuse or redo things in here. But all of the loads are supposed to be on this side of the fuse because basically this stuff's not protected. So we're going to take all of this off and redo everything. Only we're going to, instead of having that battery, we're going to have this battery line. Then also up here you can see this black wire right here. That is the negative off of the battle-born battery, and it just ties into the RV frame for your ground, and that's where everything becomes the ground here on the RV. So we're just going to take the black wire coming off of that piece up there, the 48 to 12 converter, and we're going to tie it into the frame. Now over here in the pass-through, we have our 1 gauge positive coming out off of our T fuse from underneath the bed. It feeds up here into our circuit breaker. This circuit breaker actually came with the inverter, and then the other end comes up around. This is all going to get tied up and feeds up and into the inverter. Then we have our negative that is coming off of our smart shunt, coming out, up, and into our inverter. Up here in the front by all of the controls, I have the Victron BMV712 Smart Battery Monitor. This is connected to the Victron shunt via a data cable, and it gives you some basic information on what's going on with your batteries, like what the voltage of the batteries are. This is also Bluetooth, so it connects to the Victron app, and you can see more details about what's going on with the battery in the app, like how much something is using, what the current voltage is, what the wattage is, and also what kind of charge is coming in via the solar panels. I did want to show, I've also added this piece right here, and this is just a 3D printed case, and in here I have a Raspberry Pi. Now this Raspberry Pi is actually connected via a data cable out to the inverter. And it's running a program called Solar Assistant, and I'll leave a link for that down below. A Solar Assistant is basically a program that runs on the Raspberry Pi, and it monitors everything that's going on with your system. And you can log into it both in the RV via Bluetooth as well as on internet. So if you have internet in your RV, you could be monitoring everything that's happening with your system from wherever you are. I really like the way it integrates with the whole EG4 ecosystem. It also works with other systems like Victron and stuff. And I found that this is a much better way to manage everything than the one that actually comes with the EG4 inverter. But again, I will leave a link for it down below. There's a couple of different ways that you can do it. If you already have a Raspberry Pi, you can simply buy the download and install it yourself, or you can buy a Raspberry Pi from them that already has everything all set up. Once you have the program installed on the Raspberry Pi, it's simply going through and setting it up based on the system that you have. So that's the battery side of our off-grid system, and I have to say, we've been very pleased with this system. I mean, we have gone multiple days without ever being plugged in, even on rainy days, and we've never ever had to worry about battery power. Even though we're going to go over this in more detail in the final video of this series, let me give you some of the results that we've experienced using this system in Eleanor. When we were getting ready to go to the Florida RV Super Show in January, we actually had to do some prep work on Eleanor. So we pulled her out from the side of the house, we put her out in the front of the house, and we were running on solely battery and solar power. We then proceeded to go up to the Florida RV Super Show, where we did have 30 amp power available to us. But since we've never boondocked before, we decided, let's see how this system works. We were there for 4 days, then brought it back home, where we had to then pull out furniture. We have a video on our pulling out furniture up here, and had to also prep for RV Unplugged. So the entire RV was unplugged for about 12 days. During that time, we were running our air fryer, TVs, we ran the heat a few days, microwave, coffee machine, Rachel's hair dryer, and the air conditioner for many days. The system never dropped below about 70% the entire time, even when we had the air conditioner running for about 8 hours one day. The system worked flawlessly. In addition to that, when we went to RV Unplugged, we never had our batteries drop below 80%, even though we were running our heat all night, every day, for 7 or 8 hours, and that blower motor does use a lot of electricity. We were watching TV every day when we were going to sleep. We were running the microwave. We had our air fryer going, coffee machine, plus everything else. We just didn't even pay attention to the amount of power we were using, and our batteries never dropped below 80%, even on the days where it was raining. We did have one day where we plugged our generator in just for a couple of hours because they were calling for rain for like 2 or 3 days, and we wanted to make sure going into those days we had 100% battery. Once that didn't happen, we never ran the generator again. And again, the system worked amazing. We could not be more impressed with the way this system runs. I will say, though, there are a couple of drawbacks to this system, which we may have touched in the other video. I'm going to touch in here, and then we'll also touch in at the very end. The biggest drawback to this entire system is the 48 to 12 volt converter. Unfortunately, I believe the largest 48 to 12 volt converter that Victron sells is the one that I have, and it's only a 30 amp converter. I really need to get a second one and run them together so that we have more amperage on the 12 volt side. I mean, everything runs great in the RV. I mean, the slides come in, our power tongue jack works fine, the refrigerator, the 12 volt, like lights, all of our water pumps, everything works great. But what I do notice is when something kicks on that has a high amperage draw, for example, running in the slide, or when the water pump first kicks on, you'll get some like flicker or brief interruption in the 12 volt. So like my lights in the ceiling will flicker for a quick second. It's more of an annoyance than anything. The real problem comes with our water pump and our Truma hot water heater. The Truma hot water heater requires 12 volt for the entire system, even though it runs on gas. If it loses 12 volt for even a second, you have to reset the system. Not a big deal. You simply turn it off and then you turn it back on and everything is good. What I noticed was if you had the water pump off and then you turned it on, sometimes, and not all the time, but sometimes, when the water pump would kick on, it would cause that flicker, which would cause a brief interruption in power to the Truma 12 volt system, which would make the system turn off, and then you had to reset it. It was more of an annoyance than anything, especially when Rachel would go to get in the shower and she would turn on the hot water and not have hot water because we didn't realize the system turned itself off. If I were to get a second 48 to 12 volt converter and connect them together, that would solve all of the issues. Now, there are two other downsides to this system. They're kind of small downsides, but I still want to mention them. One has to do with the batteries and one has to do with the solar. I'll get into the solar one in more detail in the next video, but I'll briefly mention here the biggest downside is you have to have a pretty large solar array because it does require 125 volts of solar for the solar to kick on, which means you're going to have to run your solar panels in series so that you can get 125 volts. You can also get like step-up converters, but I'm not really that knowledgeable on that, so I just have a lot of solar panels. The other one is with the batteries themselves. So this system does require batteries to always be hooked up. If you have a standard 12 volt system in your RV and it's being charged by the converter that your RV came with, whether it be regular 12 volt or it be like lithium, if you were to disconnect the battery, you could still run your RV from shore power because when you plug in, you would be getting shore power to all of your outlets, and then the converter would actually provide 12 volt to your 12 volt panel over there. With this system, it requires the batteries to work. So if I were to disconnect my battery array completely and then plug in a shore power, nothing will work. It has to have the batteries. That is another reason why I'm running more than one battery. A lot of people would look at a system like this and be like, hey, I really only need one battery. And the same thing for 12 volts, honestly. For me, I like having a backup. I like knowing that if one battery fails, I still have two more. And you can have the same thing with a 12 volt system. You know, there are more and more companies that instead of making a 12 volt 100 amp hour battery, they're making a 12 volt 300 amp hour battery or a 12 volt 400 amp hour battery and going, hey, one is good enough. And that might be possible. But I like the fact of if my one battery goes, I can always run on another battery. And that is something to think about. I prefer having at least 2 batteries, if not more. This way you have a backup battery at all times. But other than that, we are super, super happy with this system. Now, in the next video, I will briefly go over the solar. There's not too much to it. I have no video of us actually doing the install, but I'll kind of go over the solar array in a little bit more detail, the disconnect switch, how it hooks up, and then in the last video, we'll actually go over some real-time usage and show you what happens using the Victron app when we kick things on and off. Now, please, if you've gotten any information out of this video, if it has been useful in any way, please do us a favor, hit that like button on this video down below. It really does help build the channel, but more importantly, it lets us know what kind of videos you guys are looking to see. And while you're down there, please do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon. This way you are notified every time we upload a new video. And until next time, happy camping.